Hey everyone, welcome to today's deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at the Liat show.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one.
Yeah, it's described as this mix of storytelling and insights into Israeli culture and, all mixed up with kind of commentary and a running narrative.
What's really interesting is that it's more than just a typical podcast. I mean, Liat Portal, who created it, calls herself like a first-of-her-kind architect.
Okay.
And she doesn't mean like buildings.
Right, I was going to say.
She's talking about ideas and like experiences and perspectives.
So what does she mean by architect in this context?
Well, she says that she wants to kind of weave together like history and music and science and entrepreneurship and business and art and food and like personal stories faster than you can grab a snack.
Wow, that's quite the mix.
Yeah, and she does it. She really pulls it off.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be focusing on one of Liat's recent posts, and it was about the power of smell and memory.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, particularly in the context of the recent Southern California wildfires.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a surprising connection, but when you think about it, scent is so powerful. I mean, it can just trigger these really vivid memories and just strong emotional responses.
Definitely. And, you know, Liat actually had family in L.A.,
Oh, wow.
and some of them were actually directly impacted by the fires.
Oh, no.
Others, thankfully, were safe, but, still had to deal with a constant smell of smoke.
Right, yeah, just lingering in the air.
Yeah.
It just makes it so personal, right? I mean, imagine seeing the images of these like burned out neighborhoods.
Right.
And at the same time, you're surrounded by the smell of smoke. It
No.
just creates this like visceral, multi-sensory experience of loss.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
And it makes you think, what kind of impact will those smells have on people's memories of the fires in the long term?
That's a great question. I mean, just think about it. A simple smell can transport you back to a certain moment
Right.
and evoke, a really strong emotion or even trigger a physical sensation.
Like a time machine for your senses.
Yeah, it is.
Leah actually mentioned in her post that the smell of the 2010 Mount Carmel forest fire in Israel, stayed with her for years afterwards.
Wow. Yeah, and it highlights how powerful scent can be, especially for people who have experienced trauma.
For sure. And she made this really interesting observation about first responders and rescue forces.
Mm-hmm.
She was saying for those people, these traumatic smells aren't just isolated events.
Right.
It's part of their everyday work.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I mean, most of us might, smell a fire or, the aftermath of something really tragic
Right.
a few times in our lives. But firefighters and police officers and paramedics,
Yeah.
they're exposed to this all the time. It's
Yeah.
just ingrained in their experience.
I can't even imagine the mental and emotional weight that they carry.
That must be so heavy.
Liat specifically talked about how, for a firefighter, the smell of smoke might not just be a reminder of, particular fire,
Right.
but a trigger for a cascade of memories, anxieties, traumas.
Yeah, and the research backs this up too.
Really?
I mean, studies have shown that exposure to traumatic scents can lead to PTSD
Oh, wow.
and other mental health challenges, especially for first responders.
That's really sobering.
It is.
It makes you realize how much we owe to these people who are putting their lives on the line
Right.
and dealing with these really difficult experiences day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just firefighters either. Think about, Holocaust survivors,
Right.
survivors of terror attacks, or battlefield veterans.
Wow.
Certain smells can trigger flashbacks,
Oh, God.
nightmares, and intense emotional distress.
That's a whole hidden dimension of trauma that most people don't even consider.
Right.
And yet it can have such a profound impact on their lives.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really speaks to the power of smell
Mm.
and how deeply it's connected to our memory
Yeah.
and our emotional centers.
Liat also uses her platform to talk about issues of public perception and responsibility,
Okay.
especially in the wake of these disasters like the California wildfires.
Yeah, I've seen some of that.
She's challenging this tendency that we have to just point fingers
Uh-huh.
or place blame on specific people or institutions without really acknowledging the complexities of disaster response.
That's a good point because it is so easy to just get caught up in the blame game
Yeah.
and overlook, these systemic issues.
Right, like inadequate funding for disaster preparedness.
Right.
Or just the lack of support for first responders.
Yeah, it's like focusing on treating the symptoms of something without addressing the root cause.
Exactly. And she uses this really powerful analogy to kind of illustrate this point.
Okay.
She compares these outdated disaster preparedness systems to trying to draw water from a 100-year-old. Well,
Okay.
that was built for a small village to try and supply a modern city.
Right. And that's exactly the problem. The
Yeah.
demands on, emergency response systems have grown so much,
Yeah.
but the resources and the infrastructure haven't kept pace.
It's like we're constantly just playing catch-up,
Mhm.
reacting to crises
Yeah.
instead of being proactive and preparing for them.
It's a recipe for disaster, And that's why what Liat's saying about like a complete overhaul of disaster preparedness makes so much sense.
Right. It's about moving beyond blame and, taking collective responsibility.
Yeah.
And that includes, supporting the people on the front lines, like the firefighters and the first responders,
Right.
rescue workers who are putting themselves in harm's way.
Exactly. And, Liat is like a fierce advocate for those people.
Yeah.
She really highlights, the physical and the emotional and the mental toll
Right.
that they experience, and often with very little recognition or support.
It's true. And she points out that, they're not just like these faceless heroes.
Right.
They're real people
Yeah.
with families and lives and experiences that, shape who they are.
Yeah.
And the trauma that they encounter doesn't just disappear when they clock out.
It stays with them, lingers in their memories and their dreams,
Right.
and sometimes even in the very air they breathe.
Which brings us back to the power of smell. It's one thing to intellectually understand the concept of PTSD or the long-term effects of trauma,
Right.
but it's another to actually imagine what it's like to live with those memories day in and day out.
Liat's writing does a really good job at bridging that gap.
Yeah.
She's giving voice to these experiences, making the invisible visible.
For example, she talks about how for a Holocaust survivor, the smell of burning wood
Oh, yeah.
might not evoke, cozy memories of a fireplace.
Right.
But instead, it could trigger a terrifying flashback
Uh-huh.
to the horrors of the concentration camps.
Or for a veteran, the smell of diesel fuel could take them right back to the battlefield
Wow.
and just unleash this wave of anxiety and fear and grief.
It's like a stark reminder of how profound and often hidden those ways that scent can really shape our perception of the world,
Absolutely.
especially for those who've experienced trauma.
And it just makes you realize how important empathy and understanding and support are
Yeah.
for these individuals.
It's about recognizing that the scars of trauma run deep and that healing is a journey.
It's not a destination.
Liat also challenges us to think about, our own relationship with smell.
Mm-hmm.
What are the scents that evoke the strongest memories for us?
That's a good question. What are those smells that can transport you back to a
Mhm.
specific time or a place,
Yeah.
or a feeling you can almost reach out and touch?
It's fascinating to think about how, our personal, olfactory landscapes are shaped by our own experiences, our cultural backgrounds, even our genetics.
And it makes you wonder what someone from a completely different culture might associate with a particular smell.
Right. Like what might evoke feelings of comfort and nostalgia for one person
Yeah.
could trigger, anxiety or disgust for someone else.
That's so interesting. And it just shows how subjective, the experience of smell is,
Yeah.
even though the physiological processes are essentially the same for all of us.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore,
Yeah.
more to understand about the world around us, even when it comes to something like smell.
And that's one of the things that makes the Liat show so interesting, It encourages us to think differently, to question our assumptions,
Yeah.
and to kind of embrace these new perspectives.
It's about expanding our horizons and, recognizing how interconnected things are.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these seemingly different ideas, experiences, and cultures.
And speaking of connections, it's really impressive how Liat brings together all these diverse topics in her work.
It is. It's like this incredible tapestry of history, music, food,
Yeah.
personal anecdotes, and insights into Israeli culture.
And she does it all with this infectious enthusiasm and this really sharp wit that just keeps you engaged.
It's true. It's like she's inviting you on this intellectual and emotional journey,
Uh-huh.
a deep dive into the human experience.
And it's not just a one-way street either.
Right.
Liat is so engaged with her audience. She's always encouraging dialogue and feedback and even contributions to the show.
She's actually invited anyone who's been affected by the recent LA wildfires to reach out and share their stories.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It shows, how committed she is to creating a platform for diverse voices and perspectives.
Absolutely. And for those who want to, really explore the Liat show, she's got a presence on multiple platforms.
Oh, yeah. You can find her written stories and podcasts on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, watch on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, she's everywhere.
And she even has a Patreon.
Oh,
for
right.
people who want to support her work directly
Right.
and get access to exclusive content.
That's cool.
It's an amazing way to connect with Liat and her community of listeners.
Yeah. And speaking of global reach,
Mm-hmm.
did you know that people from over 72 countries tune in to the Liat Show? Wow, that's amazing. It's incredible. It just goes to show the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
And Liat's ability to connect with people on a human level,
Mm.
regardless of, their background or location. It really underscores the need to support creators like her,
For sure.
who are pushing the boundaries of traditional media
Yeah.
and creating content that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Speaking of support,
Yeah.
I know that Leia's actually really close to a big milestone on YouTube.
Really?
She's just a few subscribers away from hitting 1,000,
Wow.
which would qualify her for a Rising Star Award nomination.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if you're listening and you haven't already,
Yeah.
please go subscribe to Liat Portal on YouTube.
Yeah.
It takes like a second,
Seriously.
and it could make a huge difference for her.
Absolutely. Let's help her get that nomination.
Yeah.
It would be so well deserved.
It would, I mean, one of the things I appreciate most about Liat's work
Yeah.
is her ability to make these complex ideas
Mm-hmm.
accessible and engaging.
Right.
She doesn't shy away from tough topics,
Yeah.
but she does so in a way that's both insightful and entertaining.
It's a tough balance, but she does it so well.
She's like that friend who can explain quantum physics
Right.
and make you feel like you actually understand it.
And she does it with a sense of humor, too.
Right,
And
yeah.
humility that makes you want to keep learning and exploring.
It's no wonder people from all over the world are tuning in to The Liat Show.
Yeah.
It's like a breath of fresh air
It is.
in this media landscape that's so often dominated by clickbait headlines and superficial content.
It's a reminder that there's still a place for thoughtful and nuanced and engaging storytelling.
Exactly. And that's why we highly recommend checking out The Liat Show.
Yeah.
It's a truly unique and rewarding experience.
So what are you waiting for?
Go subscribe, listen, watch, and join the conversation.
We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into The Liat Show. As we've been talking about Liat's work and her focus on the power of smell, I keep thinking about those people who lost everything in the LA wildfires.
Yeah, it's just devastating.
It's hard to even imagine, the depth of their loss.
And that smell of smoke. Even after the flames are gone, it must be so hard.
It makes you wonder if, immersing yourself in something like The Liat Show could actually be helpful.
That's an interesting thought.
Right.
It might seem kind of counterintuitive, but sometimes, engaging with stories and ideas that are totally unrelated to what you're going through can give you a new perspective.
Right. It's like a distraction, but a good distraction.
Exactly. And the Liat Show touches on so many different human experiences. She talks about loss and resilience and the power of community and finding meaning in these unexpected places.
And she does it all with this great blend of, personal stories and historical insights and even humor.
Yeah, which can be so important when you're dealing with grief and trauma.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think what makes The Liat Show so unique is that it's not just about, passively listening.
Right.
It's about actively engaging with these ideas and connecting with other people.
Yeah, she really fosters that sense of community.
He does.
She's always encouraging people to reach out and share their stories and just be a part of the conversation.
And she's invited anyone who's been affected by the LA wildfires to contact her.
Oh, wow.
She wants to hear their stories and give them a platform.
That's really powerful.
So if you're listening and you've been impacted by the fires, please reach out to Liat.
Yeah.
She really wants to connect with you and hear your story.
And for those of you who haven't checked out the Liat Show yet,
Yeah.
we really recommend it.
You got to check it out.
It's a really unique and enriching experience.
You can find her on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Patreon.
And don't forget to subscribe to her YouTube channel.
Yes, please do.
She's so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers,
Yeah, just a few away.
which would qualify her for that Rising Star Award nomination.
So let's help her get there.
It's such a small thing to do, but it can make a big difference.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. The Liat Show reminds us that even when we're facing huge challenges,
Yeah.
there's always room for curiosity and connection.
And the power of storytelling.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those senses sharp.